How's it, guys? This is Dayvy FPL and welcome back to another Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now this video is going to be kind of a more general Premier League video, as I'll be looking at the fixtures that were just announced about an hour ago. But I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into the Fantasy Premier League side of it with a look at who has the best and worst fixtures initially. This is going to be a very initial reaction to the fixtures, as there's a lot of time before the start of the season, about 57 days from today, and a lot of action is going to be happening in the transfer market, and there are going to be a lot of selection issues to come with these transfers. Having said that, there have been a couple of big transfers already, the likes of Eden Hazard leaving Chelsea, and we're going to be seeing how they all react to that, especially with their transfer ban. But as I said, a very initial reaction to the fixtures, as the transfers will hopefully change a lot of the perspective on potential teams. So going into this video, we're going to be looking at the teams that have the best and worst fixtures over the first 6 game weeks. I think that that's basically the only time span that we can kind of look at, as we can't really prepare for what's going to be happening at the end. However, I will be creating a more thorough video towards the beginning of this upcoming season. It's probably going to be titled "Who has the best fixtures?" and it's going to include teams that you should be having in your lineups for game week 1. And also we're going to be looking at kind of a more general fixture schedule, as I think that this is going to prove very helpful in our chip strategy, especially that wildcard chip strategy for the upcoming season. So as I said, this video is going to be kind of just a very initial take on it. So if you're watching this video the day of release or watching it in a month's time, it will still be quite profitable and will be worth it. So I hope you enjoy this video, and let's get right into it. The first point I'm going to be making is kind of the two fixture-proof teams, in my opinion, for the upcoming season. We have the title winners Manchester City and the runners-up Liverpool. These two teams, in my opinion, can play any teams maybe besides each other, but they do have some very good historical scoring records against each other. But I think that any teams that they have are considered good fixtures. I've included this point as I think these two teams are going to be the two teams that we triple up on with our players, and I think that there are no better teams than to do that. One thing I just wanted to note about these two teams is that they both are included in the Community Shield, which is considered a pre-season fixture as it occurs before the first game week. This is going to be very profitable for us, as we can see the selection and the lineups that these two teams put out, as I'm sure that they're going to go full strength and go for that Community Shield. This provides us with a little bit of insight into the upcoming game weeks, as we will be able to see what players are selected before that first game week. Especially useful for the likes of Man City, who are considered probably the biggest rotation worries out of any teams. However, last season kind of proved that there are some players in there like Sterling and Aguero who will always play. The other thing to note is that Liverpool are playing Chelsea in the European Super Cup, which occurs between game week 1 and 2. A little bit unfortunate, as we won't be able to be given much insight into the selection lineups, but it is to note that this is a trophy that these two teams can win, and we could see some rotation before or after this game. It falls slap bang in the middle of game week 1 and 2, so a little bit unfortunate there, but just keep that in mind when you're looking at these two teams and how many players you bring in. Now we're going to talk about the promoted teams: Aston Villa, Norwich City and Sheffield United. No order there, just alphabetical. These three teams are the promoted teams that came up from the Championship, and when we're looking at fixtures and teams to play, unfortunately I'm going to be saying that these are the 3 worst teams in the Premier League. It might not be true, but I just think historically all teams that are promoted are kind of considered the worst, and they do generally perform the worst. Probably looking at about 2 of these 3 teams going down next season. However, that can all change with transfers. This is just a very initial reaction to them, and I'm sorry if you do support one of these teams. I'm sure that they're going to be doing quite well in the Premier League, and I'm sure you're happy that they're back. But I just think historically, and the historical facts point towards probably 2 of these 3 teams being relegated. Obviously, this is coming from last season, where the Wolves had an absolute cracker and ended up finishing in the top 10, I do believe. So one of these teams could prove that. If they are clever in their transfers and have a good footballing style, I'm sure they can do quite well in the Premier League next season. But just from a fixture point of view, I'm going to be considering that this is the best team to play against, and when we look at fixtures, they're probably going to be looking at captaincy options. So we're just going to look at the opening day fixtures, and having come from that just point I've proven with the relegation teams, that first fixture hits you like a bomb. Liverpool versus Norwich at Anfield is an absolute cracker, and probably looking at initial captaincy options there and potential triple ups. However, this fixture is a little bit annoying as I said, the Liverpool do have the European Super Cup, so maybe we could see some rotation there. However, I do think that this first game for Liverpool at home against a newly promoted side is going to be quite profitable, and I consider it being the best fixture that you can get. Just coming from the standpoint that Liverpool and Norwich, Liverpool love to play Norwich, and we've had those Luis Suarez hat-tricks. Unfortunately, Luis Suarez does not play for Liverpool anymore, but they do have the two wingers, Sadio Mane and Salah. So looking at them for this upcoming game week, or game week 1, and they are looking quite good, and that's probably the fixture that stands out of these. You do have Man City versus West Ham, which is not a terrible fixture. West Ham weren't the best defensively last season, so could see Man City scoring there. Then we have Bournemouth versus Sheffield United. That's probably one of the underrated fixtures, I do believe, in this upcoming game week 1. I think that Bournemouth could score a lot of goals there, especially at home, so that's one to keep your eye on for those maybe budget or differential captaincy options. We do have Spurs versus Aston Villa. I think Spurs, with their first season having to play all their home fixtures at their new stadium, I think they're going to be raring to go for that one, so could see some goals in that. And then the big fixture, Man United versus Chelsea. Now, I just want to say, please don't let this fixture put you off these two teams. It's a bad initial fixture, but after this fixture, Chelsea and Man United do have some nice fixtures coming up. I don't think they're the best fixtures, but definitely don't look at this from a very isolated perspective. Man United and Chelsea, just because they play each other, that doesn't put you off. However, you could maybe bypass this fixture and bring them in after. All the other fixtures are kind of quite general, and you could be looking at some of these teams for budget and enablers, but the standout fixture is definitely Liverpool versus Norwich. So now we're going to go into teams that have the worst fixtures coming up. The first team is Burnley. Over the first 6 fixtures, they face Arsenal away, Liverpool at home, and Wolves away. So coming from this, their initial fixture against Southampton is not the worst in the world, but then having to play the likes of Arsenal, Wolves, and Liverpool is not the best, especially when 2 of those 3 are away from home. I just think that Burnley were a little bit lackluster in the previous season, and unless they make a lot of transfers, they might not perform that well this season. And I think with this starting 6 fixtures, it's not the best. They do, however, have Norwich in that 6th fixture at home, and actually after these upcoming fixtures, they do have a nice little run of easier fixtures. So definitely maybe looking at them past the Liverpool fixture, but definitely not before. The next team is Tottenham Hotspurs, and they start off with a nice fixture against Aston Villa, but then they go away to Man City. They then face Newcastle, which is not the worst fixture in the world, but Newcastle were a little bit resilient defensively last season. And then they do have the Arsenal fixture. The Arsenal fixture is not actually that bad in my opinion. I do think that Arsenal were a little bit leaky last season, and this North London derby always kind of supplies some goals. So not off-put by that fixture, but then they face Crystal Palace and Leicester. So I would say that they probably have one of the worst schedules to go into the season. But definitely there could be some defensive options, or maybe even Harry Kane if he takes a price cut. Then we have probably some of the worst fixtures also continued. I do think that these fixtures aren't as bad as Spurs fixtures, but they are not the best. We have the starting fixture of Newcastle versus Arsenal, which I don't think is a bad standpoint. I think that you're probably going to be writing off Newcastle in this fixture, but if they do get taken over and spend some money on some players, I'm sure they can do well here. They then have Norwich, which is a great fixture, but then Spurs, followed by Watford, and Liverpool isn't the best. Ended off with quite a nice fixture against Brighton, and we could see maybe them getting some goals there, especially if they get Rondon again. I do believe that he was on loan, so maybe a permanent transfer is in the books. Now going on to the better side of life, and we do have Everton here, who in my opinion probably have the best fixtures initially. They face Crystal Palace away, which is not the best, but could see them getting a result there. Then they face Watford, Aston Villa, Wolves, Bournemouth, and Sheffield United at home on the last game of the 6-week calendar. That is quite a nice schedule there, and I can definitely see some of the defensive options from Everton being likely there. As their attacking options aren't the best, they do have players like Gylfi Sigurdsson, but up front with Calvert-Lewin, who seems to have won that spot, maybe could be a budget enabler. But Everton do have some very nice fixtures, and I can see us kind of picking up some of their players going into game week 1. Then we have Liverpool, who, as I said, have that very nice fixture against Norwich. They do have the last fixture against Chelsea, but as I said, the Arsenal fixture in my books is not the worst, especially at home. So probably the worst fixture in that game is Chelsea away. I can see them dealing with that game as well, and I can see Liverpool basically always scoring against any team. So that's why I've kind of put them in here. Filler fixtures are Southampton, Burnley, and Newcastle, which aren't the worst in the world, especially the fact that they are playing Newcastle at home. In terms of overall, Liverpool do have quite a lot of big teams in the middle of the season, so we probably will be looking at bringing them in at the initially and then transferring them out. The second last team actually is Man City. They start off with a nice fixture against West Ham, and then they welcome Spurs to their stadium, followed by Bournemouth, Brighton, Norwich, and Watford. Man City will always score, as Liverpool will as well, so I can see them scoring a lot of goals here, and I think we're going to be tripling up on their players. The Spurs fixture is not the worst as it is at home, so that kind of nullifies that effect. The last team with the best fixtures I'm going to highlight is Bournemouth. I spoke about their opening fixture against Sheffield United, and then they play back-to-back newly promoted teams with Aston Villa. They do have the Man City fixture, but they are playing that at home, and sometimes Bournemouth can always surprise us. However, I don't think they're going to be getting much out of that lineup. Then we have Leicester, Everton, and Southampton. So the initial fixtures are probably where it's at and where I probably will be bringing in Bournemouth players. But following that, aren't the worst fixtures in the world, but not the best either. So this is basically going to wrap up my impressions of who has the best and the worst fixtures. I hope you've enjoyed it, and hopefully it gets your mind thinking FPL again. I know it's been quite a while since we spoke last, so I hope you've enjoyed this little short break, and I'll be bringing a lot of more FPL content over this next holiday period. So please like the video if you did enjoy. Comment down below if you have any suggestions for the start of next season and what videos I can make, and otherwise subscribe if you're new here, and if you are enjoying the content and hoping for more content in the future. Hopefully there's a couple of you new subscribers that are playing FPL for the first time, and I'll be uploading some tips videos on how you can do well next season. So hope you enjoyed the video, guys. This has been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers, bye.